This is John Musgrave. Thank you for coming to the podcast. If you like this content or this episode, please click like or even subscribe or hit that thumbs up button on your screen, and that'll help more people find us. Thanks for listening. So as we divide out the Bible, one of the sections of the Bible that is referred to by Old Testament and New Testament Jews and us are the poetry part, or the poets. So I had a class in seminary called Judges Through Poets. Anyone know what we're referring to when we talk about the poets? What books of the Bible would that be? I'll give you a hint, they're all together.
Psalms, Proverbs, Song of Solomon, or Songs.
And today we're talking about Job. There you go. So there's your test-taking skill there. Job in the next 5. So you got 5 books of the Bible that we refer to as poets. They're the poetic section of Scripture. And one of the things, now if you have a Bible that doesn't include versification, I'm not sure if the ESV does or not. I know the NAS didn't, but the NIV includes that where you've got the indentation and stuff, so you can see that it's quotes. You see a lot of that in Job and Psalms, and so you have, when you're reading through these books, typically the pages go fast because you don't have full lines. You're not going left to right margin, left to right margin, left to right margin, left to right margin. You've got, cola. That's the word in poetry, where you got, a set of words, like when you're reading a poem there. And so it's not just a confluence of stuff. Okay, so Job is the first of the poetic books that we have in Scripture. Not that that's not saying that there's an author writing up fiction or just completely thoughts, but a lot of stuff that are thoughts about God in these 5 books of the Bible, as opposed to narrative. You've got some narrative going on. In Song of Psalms, you've got some narrative, and here in Job, certainly you've got some narrative, but a lot of discussion, a lot of thoughts and statements about God. Okay, so when does Job live? Do we think maybe? Don't die on a hill for it, but we think maybe Job lives when?
Israel's in Egypt.
Yeah, when Israel's in Egypt. Why do we say Job is not a man who lives after Egypt? What's our key point on that? He himself is offering sacrifices without the aid of priests. Okay, once you get to Mount Sinai, you've got priests. Okay, Levitical priests are established through the law at Mount Sinai under Moses. And, the Levitical priests are, of course, they come from Levi. And so you got to have Levi first, at least, and his descendants, enough to be priests and Levites, general Levites there. Okay. And when are we kind of guessing? Now, there's a wide range for when the book of Job was written, but where have we kind of plopped down as our most likely, or at least what I think is most likely, which you're free to disagree from? The writing of the book. Okay, Job's about great chaos going on to righteous people in the midst of other people who are less righteous, who are prospering and doing fine. When's a time where this message would be apropos?
During the period of Judges?
It could be during the period of Judges. That would be an earlier set there.
Or the divided kingdom?
Or the divided kingdom, yeah. And so I lean towards the divided kingdom. Now, Ezekiel, who is writing at the front of the exile, speaks of Job. And so that means Job is very well known by the time Ezekiel's speaking. And so that's one reason why we wouldn't put it in the exile itself, even though the exile is a period of where a righteous person might be wondering, why has this happened to me? I've been righteous. But since Ezekiel speaks of Job, we say, no, Job is a well-known figure among the exiles, and so Job is not hot off the press. It's something in the psyche and realm and conscious knowledge of God's people. So divided kingdom would be good. Imagine being in northern Israel, and you are righteous and faithful and following God, and yet you're pinned to your land because of who you are. You're descended from Zebulun or Dan or Naphtali or Asher. You're one of the northern tribe people, so you're pinned to your land, but yet your king is encouraging Baal worship and the worship of the golden calves down in Bethel and up in Dan. And so you would have such a kind of stress. In the north, we don't always see that they're just impoverished and things are not going well for them. Under Jeroboam II, they're very wealthy. This is known in history. They're very wealthy and they're prospering and that kind of thing. Even though Jeroboam II was a pretty terrible northern king. And so you could see the book of Job going toward that. A righteous person in northern Israel with unrighteous people, wicked people around him, yet there's suffering. Yeah. Yeah, Matthew.
So I've always wondered when the kingdom split. Yeah. Were righteous northern people permitted to migrate to the south?
They probably snuck away for festivals. We see various kings of Judah inviting people from the north to come down for the festivals. But it may have been a little bit at risk, kind of like when Samuel goes to anoint David as king.
Well, I mean, like you were talking about them being pinned to the land.
Yeah.
Is there anything, like, was that, you're not supposed to give away your ancestral land. You're
right.
not supposed to just leave it.
Yeah.
Was there any relaxing of that, or is the covenant?
There's nothing recorded of northern people leaving their lands to live in the south. Had they done that, which could have happened in certain cases, but it's just not recorded because of what word? Selection. Yep, there we go. Just not something we need to know. So great question there. Just kidding you. Get it? No.
I'm not crying.
Yeah, no. People could come down, but they probably would have left servants up there to keep their land up for them because it was something that God didn't permit for somebody to permanently sell their land to someone else.
I suppose a better argument would be that you're supposed to stay there and persevere and trust in the Lord to keep you even in enemy territory.
Yeah, and I think the books of 1st and 2nd Samuel, that's a pretty good oomph for them. To the northern Israelites, pray for the situation here. Pray for your neighbors in northern Israel to come back under the son of David, because blessing comes through him according to the Davidic covenant, even when the son of David has been sinful, which you see displayed in 2 Samuel. 2 Samuel is a book showing that the great sin of David with Bathsheba and the murder of Bathsheba's husband does not make God revoke the Davidic covenant. God still, according to his covenant promise to David, under your sons, God's people will be forever. Okay? Okay. So that's Job there. The content of the book. So what's the setup? We've been through this already. I'm just getting our brain juices flowing again. What's the setup for Job? First couple chapters. What goes on in the first couple chapters?
Satan goes to God at his throne.
Okay, so the setup is in heaven, and God looks to Satan and says what to Satan?
He's righteous, most righteous man on earth.
Have you considered my servant Job?
Yeah.
There we go. And what's Satan's contention about Job?
He has all this stuff
Yeah, what happens because he has all this stuff?
that he worships you.
Yeah. He's only worshiping you because you've given him everything. You know, he's so blessed. And so God says, very well, and what's the next step of our little setup here? What's God do then?
You can do what you want, but you can't harm him.
Yeah, you can do what you want, but you can't harm him. Take away all his stuff, but don't lay a finger on him. And so God releases Satan from heaven to do that. Satan does that. Does Job depart from his faithfulness to the Lord? No, he doesn't. So then there's what? A second scene in heaven. Right? And what happens in this second scene in heaven?
Allowed to inflict problems on his health.
Yeah, so, Satan says what? Skin for skin or something like that. You know, if you let me harm him and give him boils on his skin and sickness or whatever, then he'll curse you. And so what's God say to that?
You just can't kill him, but go ahead and do what you want to do.
Yeah, you can't kill him, but go ahead with anything else. And what's Job's wife's response to all this? Curse God and die. And what's Job's response?
Never.
No way. Yeah, never. And then, so that's our setup there. So Job has this tragedy upon him. Why?
Because he was righteous.
Yeah, because he's righteous. The friends come along. We read this last week. What's their viewpoint about why Job is experiencing what he's experiencing? What do they think?
You must have
He's
done
in
something
deep
wrong.
sin.
Yeah, you must have done something wrong. You must be in deep sin. So we looked at those couple of verses there. I was reading this morning. I happen to be in Job right now in my reading. Job 22, if you flip back there, in addition to, we looked at 4 and 8 there to see the viewpoint of Job's friends. But Eliphaz, the Temanite, says, so Job 22, look at verse 4. And Allison, can you read this, verse 4, and Andrew, verse 5?
Is it for your piety that he rebukes you and brings charges against you?
Is not your wickedness great? Are not your sins endless?
Yeah, so that's the viewpoint of the friends. That he's not rebuking you because you're pious. He's not bringing charges against you because you're pious. It's because your wickedness is great and your sins are endless. And then he goes on from there to give false accusations of things that are the opposite of what Job has done, which we know from previous verses there. Okay, so that's the viewpoint of the friends. And what do we call this kind of wisdom that the friends have? Yeah, good. Proverbial wisdom. That was Christine, everybody. Proverbial wisdom. And what's proverbial wisdom? How do we say that? Or how would we define that?
Wisdom of the world?
Sometimes. Sometimes the world says do evil and good things will happen to you. And that's not proverbial wisdom.
General.
Do good and you'll be blessed. That's proverbial wisdom. That's not false. But it's not in this life what?
Absolutely. Always true.
Guaranteed all the time. And so we have the Proverbs, written by Solomon, the Proverbs, and they're true. But they are generally true. And in our era, the best rule of thumb for us is they're true for our souls, not for our circumstances. Okay? Proverbial wisdom will be 100% true when? New heavens and new earth. So, proverbial wisdom, do good and you'll be blessed, certainly true for our souls. James 1:25. Chapter 1, verse 25. That as we do good, as we read the law and don't forget it, but do it, we'll be blessed in the doing of it. Our souls are blessed. We know this is right. Our souls are satisfied. There's satisfaction in us when we do what is right, even when we're persecuted for doing what's right. Because we know as we're persecuted, God sees this and he's pleased. And I've done what was right, even though it was hard to do what was right. And maybe I even knew I'd get blasted for doing what was right. And I did it anyway. And that's really satisfying. Okay? And so that's true in our souls, proverbial wisdom. Sometimes it's true that if we treat our employees well or treat our supervisor well and that kind of thing, that we're promoted. That's proverbial wisdom. And so we proceed as if proverbial wisdom is going to be true, yet we don't bank on the results of proverbial wisdom. And so it's the end of Ecclesiastes where Solomon says, now all has been considered. What is the conclusion of the matter? Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment, whether good or evil. And so whether now or later, we're going to get the results of doing good. But Ecclesiastes, it's been an examination that all is meaningless. You can't tell when you do good if you're going to get the righteous man's reward or the wicked man's reward. And when you look at somebody like Job, you don't know if the results Job gets are meaningless to determining how Job has been. That is, has Job been a righteous man or has he been a wicked man? You don't know. It's vanity. It's meaningless. And that's what Ecclesiastes is about. That sometimes the wicked are prospering wonderfully. And what I read this morning in Job was this. Job was saying, the wicked are prospering like all get out, and they're popular. That's what he says. Everyone's following them, too. But sometimes that's not the deal. But in the end, proverbial wisdom will be true. But in this life, don't bank on it, and don't have your faith be shaken when bad things happen to you. That's the great lesson of Job. It's like we talk about, one of the purposes of the book of Job is understanding the limits of proverbial wisdom. Proverbial wisdom is true for final judgment and into the new heavens and new earth. Proverbs 11:21. Be sure of this: the wicked will not go unpunished. The wicked will not go unpunished, but those who are righteous will go free. Those who are righteous will go free. And so we'll be experiencing freedom and joy and those kind of things because of our covenant faithfulness. And the wicked will be punished, but not necessarily in this life. Sometimes, yes. That's why cop shows survive. Right? That's why there are always cop shows. And cop shows know that there's this satisfaction, and we'll always come back to seeing the bad guy who's just about to get away with it have some clue revealed, and then he gets nailed in court, and you say, whoo, Jack McCoy is awesome, right? But also in those shows, sometimes they have the wicked man get away because they know that's like, oh, man. And that frustrates us when justice doesn't happen. Because I think that's part of the image of God in us, that we long for justice, except against us, because that would be trouble. We're glad justice was met upon Jesus. Okay, so that's the friend's perspective. They're all about proverbial wisdom. You must have done something wrong, and that's why that's happening. And so, are they right? No, they're as wrong as they could be. They're accusing the most righteous man on earth by God's judgment. God himself has judged Job as the most righteous man on earth. Have you considered my servant Job? And they're accusing him, the most righteous man on earth, of wrongdoing. So read in there, you're ready to preach Jesus now if you're giving a sermon. Get it? sermon is, that happens to you, understand that, but know that you're comforted because this happened to Jesus as well. And he had people at the cross, and he had people shouting, crucify him, who were probably saying, well, he's been turned over by the religious leaders, and Pilate's presenting him to us. He must be a sinner, and I just didn't know about it. Okay, crucify him. Right? And so, there we go. This is Job's struggles are the struggles of Jesus himself. To be more righteous than anyone on the earth and to experience the worst fate of anyone on earth. That's Job and that's Jesus both. Yeah, Matthew.
I was going to ask, so when Jesus healed the blind man,
yeah,
it was the Pharisees that he was having
yeah.
And they said, they basically attributed that man's blindness to something that he did or something his parents did.
Yes.
Which is essentially...
Now, that was the disciples' question, but the Pharisees kind of agree with this.
Yeah.
They say, you're steeped in your sins.
Right,
Yes.
Right. So it's something that even though they had the book of Job at the time, they nonetheless kind of missed the point.
Yeah, they were going with that.
And not to say that, the opposite is true,
Yeah.
that Satan, causes blindness as part of a wager.
Yeah.
But you can't just automatically assume that someone's negative life experience is the result of sin.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, Jim.
So you really could say proverbial wisdom has been misapplied since the very beginning.
Yes.
It goes all the way through till now. That's
Yes.
really changed.
That's right. And I'm glad you used that word. It's a word that's throughout here. It's the friends are misapplying truth, misapplying proverbial wisdom. And it's not that what they say isn't true. It's that they've applied it to the wrong person in the wrong circumstances. And so we have to be careful, like Matthew you're saying, and Jim too, following up on that. We have to be careful about how we apply proverbial wisdom. Sometimes people are greatly blessed, and you look at their lives, and they're faithful to the Lord, and you're like, this is wonderful. It's great. We rejoice when proverbial wisdom is true. That's the way life should be. And so when that happens, we're glad, and we're glad when people prosper and when nice things happen to them. And we say, this is wonderful, and at the same time, when hard things happen, we don't assume, we always grant a good assumption. 1 Corinthians 13, 4-7, about love. One of the statements about love is that we assume good things of people. That's the love. We grant them the benefit of the doubt, rather than proceeding with suspicion toward everybody, unless they've got a whole record of, that has testified that we should view them in suspicion. Okay. Job's contention. Let's go to 6:24. I think this is where we left off. We didn't hit this last week, did we? Okay. So Job's contention, 24-30. This is how Job replies to his friend Eliphaz has spoken and accused him of sin. So Job's replying to that. And let's continue on with Teresa, then Matt, and following up back there, 24-30.
Teach me, that one?
Yeah, that one.
All right, teach me and I will be quiet. Show me where I've been wrong.
How painful are your honest words, but what do your arguments prove?
Do you mean to correct what I say and treat the words of a despairing man as wind?
You would even cast lots for the fatherless and barter away your friend.
But now be so kind as to look at me. Would I lie to your face?
Relent. Do not be unjust. Reconsider, for my integrity is at stake.
Is there any wickedness on my lips? Can my mouth not discern malice?
Okay. So what's Job contending about himself?
Show me what I've done.
Yeah, show me what I've done wrong. You're wrong in assuming that I've been unrighteous and wicked. That's his contention. Is Job right?
Yes.
He is right. Yeah, God has said he's the most righteous man on the earth. So our question here, can you read this for us, Ashley?
Who agrees with Job?
Yeah, who agrees with Job? God. Sometimes that's all we have. But that's a good contention there. So look at 1:8 there. And Blake, can you read 1:8 for us? Yeah, thank you. So that's Job's contention, and he's correct. Job and God are on line there, or in line with each other. Okay, next. Job's request. This is what we see Job saying a number of times throughout the back and forth. His friends speak, Job responds. His friends speak, Job responds, all the way through until we get almost to the end of the book. Job's request. Let's read 13:3. Okay, and Chase, can you read this for us? Yeah. And then onward down to verse 15, and we'll read 15 through 27, so starting with Lily. Isn't that a great one? Though he slay me, yet I will hope in him. This is our guidance on how we respond to hardship in life. God is sovereign. Job understands God has brought this on him. He doesn't know why God has brought this on him. That's his bewilderment. But he's very clear. God has brought this on me. And that's why he's asking, God, why have you brought this on me? But the statement of his faith in the midst of everything happening to him, boils on him, scraping his boils with pottery and all that gross stuff, yeah, is though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. There's no place better for us to go. It's when things go wrong for us, we don't leave God, we don't leave the church, because things aren't better not being under his care. Things are better being under his care, even if he slays us. And if he slays us, then what happens to us? We're in heaven. So that's even better. So it doesn't make sense. All blessing comes from God. And when we step out of his will and his desire and faithfulness to him, we step out of his protection and make ourselves liable to his discipline. And so when bad things are happening, we don't want to compound that by then deserving his discipline by being unfaithful to him. We just continue to be faithful and say this, though he slay me, yet will I hope in him. Okay, go ahead, Lily. Okay, so this is Job's request. He wants to defend his ways and say, God, you know I've been like this, right? I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this. Explain this to me now. Okay, onward, Faith.
This will turn out my deliverance, for no godless person will dare come before him.
Listen carefully to my words. Let your ears take in what I say.
And then Laura.
Now that I've prepared my case, I know I will be vindicated.
Can anyone bring charges against me? If so, I will be silent and die.
Only grant me these two things, O God, and then I will not hide from you.
Withdraw your hand far from me, and stop frightening me with your terrors.
Then summon me, and I will answer, or let me speak, and you reply.
How many wrongs and sins have I committed? Show me my offenses, my offense, and my sin.
Why do you hide your face and
consider me your enemy?
Will you torment and wind-blown leaf? Will you chase after dry chaff?
And Allison.
For you write down bitter things against me, and make me inherit the sins of my youth.
You fasten my feet in shackles. You keep close watch on all my paths by putting marks on the soles of my feet.
Okay. And so, verse 26 there, what's Job admitting? And helps us understand. When Job says, I'm blameless and I'm righteous, what's he admit there in verse 26? Yeah. He sins. And this is a statement you hear Job make many times throughout the book. He's not contending that he's sinless. He's contending that he's righteous. And that he's blameless in his being faithful to God. And walking in God's ways. And again, that's not 100% sinlessness when you say blameless or faithful, that kind of thing. Faithfulness is not going after other gods and not seeing God's commands and saying, well, I'm going to do this other thing instead, as a purposeful kind of thing. Okay. So our question here, what does Job want? What's his request of the Lord? He wants a hearing. Yeah. What does Job not understand? Big picture in the book of Job. What's Job not understand?
I always thought God doesn't owe him a hearing.
Correct. So Bob said God doesn't owe him a hearing, and the answer is correct. Yes. What's Job not understand?
He has no right to question.
Not aiming that way.
Understand about the bet.
He doesn't understand the bet. He doesn't understand. See, that's his question. That's what he doesn't understand. He understands he's righteous. He understands God's sovereign. He understands God is good. What he doesn't understand is how all this fits together and why this has happened to him. He doesn't understand that God is so pleased with him that he held him up as an example before Satan. That's what he doesn't understand. If he understood that, he would be able to endure better. I had somebody say to me at GA once, how are you still at that church? Right? Because pastors have gangs come up against them, and pastors resign, and they go someplace else. But I have the benefit here that Job didn't have. That there are limits to proverbial wisdom. Sometimes because you're being faithful, wolves attack you. And they come after you. And so you see that. They come after Moses. They come after David. They come after all the prophets. They come after Jesus. They come after Paul. So that's just par for the course. And so God is sovereign. And so Job can be a sinful person who's done his best to be faithful. And I thought, I've done my best to be faithful. I haven't done anything underhanded here. There's nothing anybody could bring against me that means I've been wicked in the church or done anything wicked to anybody in the church or just even personally been wicked or anything scandalous. But this is just what God had for us and had for me. Yeah. And so this is very helpful. But I could understand from Job that sometimes it's not proverbial wisdom isn't always true. Yeah, Matthew.
Understanding that he doesn't deserve a hearing in front of God, it is remarkable how confident he has to be to demand a hearing in front of God, especially acknowledging what he understands God to be and who he is and stuff like that. To be so confident in your own conduct that you feel you will do well in front of God is, a pretty good position to be in. But also, it had to have provided some comfort to him.
Yeah.
Knowing that if he could only get that hearing, maybe things would change.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's basically what he said in verse 16.
Yeah, what's he say there?
Indeed, this will turn out for my deliverance, for no godless man would dare come before him.
Yeah. So yeah, that confidence is expressed in that verse, which is what you're pointing out.
Yeah, and without the benefit of Jesus Christ as a savior too, like that is the only reason I would go in front of, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise, I'd just be like, no, thanks, I'll just suffer down here then.
Yeah. Yep. Somewhere in here, I think I read it yesterday, so I can't pin it right now, but he talks about, God himself needs to be his advocate. And so, that speaks forward to what Jesus does for us. But that speaks to, we want to live our lives, as Old Testament and New Testament says, with a clean conscience, with a good conscience toward the Lord. And so you can see it like in 1 Timothy 1, maybe verse 6-ish, somewhere around there, where Paul tells Timothy to live and to pastor the church there in Ephesus with a clear conscience, a good conscience before the Lord and sincerity of faith, so that you can just know, I could back 10 years ago just know, I haven't gone after anybody. I haven't lied. I haven't manipulated people. I just know that because that's been my mode of operation, and that's not anything. That's not anything hard to do. That's just there are some things like if somebody would say the reason you're in trouble is you don't root for Michigan, I'd say, well, I can confidently say I don't root for Michigan there. So it's like, sometimes someone will say, well, you said this, and you're like, and I'm not, and you say, 1, I didn't. 2, I don't remember saying it. 3, there's never been a time in my life where I've believed that. So there's no reason I would have ever said that. That's not even a thing that I wanted to do once and might have said or it might have slipped out. I mean, that's just like, someone saying, you said you loved Michigan. I'd say, I haven't said that. There's no reason I would say that. So I can't, you can think that I said that. I can't change your mind, but I know I haven't. And so there's a measure of confidence there. And that's not a measure of being righteous or sinless or anything. It's just, that's just not how I've lived my life, rooting for, we used to say that team up north. Now we say that cheating name, team up north. So we added a C in there. Okay. It's TTUN. Now it's TCTUN. Okay. All right. So that's the content of the book. Job doesn't understand that God believes he's righteous and is treating him as a righteous man who can withstand much terrible stuff without cursing him. And so that's our thing that he doesn't understand. Where did we leave in our reading? Andrew, did you read yet? Okay, Teresa, can you read this last statement on the board?
Why is he a righteous man? Why he, a righteous man, is suffering more than the unrighteous?
So that's what he doesn't understand. He's looking around, and really it's not a sinlessness thing. It's a comparative thing. Other people haven't done... I've literally sheltered the poor. I've literally fed the poor. I've literally taken care of widows. And there aren't many people who have done that. And they're prospering right now. Okay. All right, more content in the book. The Lord's response. So this is at the end of the book. Let's go to Job 38. The Lord's response to Job and Job's friends comes toward the end of the book. And great stuff. A lot of, if you've noticed over the last maybe 3 months, we've begun our congregational prayer. After the Lord's Prayer with praise, and that's all. Mostly, I'm reading from the Psalms and Job. Job is just rich with praise for God, and most of the praise for God is coming from the friends. It's just they're misapplying those kind of things. But Job also gives great praise to God there. But they're saying things that are true about God, really true about God. Okay, but the Lord's response to Job and his friends. So let's read this, and we'll just buzz down through this. It's great material. So 1 through 18. So Matt, we'll start with you, verse 1.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm. He said,
"Who is this that darkens my counsel with words without knowledge?"
What's the knowledge that Job doesn't have? The bet. Okay, next. Yeah. Now, I will question you, and you will answer me. It's the God perspective on all of this. Isn't that great? God's like, okay, Job, I've heard you. That's fine. I understand you're upset. Thank you for not cursing me and knowing that I'm sovereign and still giving praise to me. I understand you don't know what's going on. Now sit down and shut up. Okay, John.
Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand.
Don't you love that? Who are you to speak to me? Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Oh, so great. Okay, next. Go ahead, Jeff.
Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it?
What were its footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone?
Who shut up the sea behind doors when it burst forth from heaven?
When I laid the clouds garment and wrapped it in darkness.
When I fixed limits for it and set its doors and bars in place. When he said, "This far you may come and no farther. Here is where your proud waves halt."
Isn't this great? You get all this insight into God's creation. He opens the doors for all the waters to cover the earth. And then he says, no further may you go. He creates the dry land and says, here are your boundaries and you may not cross it. Isn't that great? Just this insight of all God's creation, setting the footings of the earth and all this stuff. He goes on. Go ahead, Laura.
Have you ever given orders to the morning or shown the dawn its place?
That it might take the earth by the edges and shape the wicked out of it.
The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment.
The wicked are denied their light, and their upraised arm is broken.
Have you journeyed to the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep?
Have the gates of death been shown to you? Have you seen the gates of the shadow of death? Have you comprehended the vast expanses of the earth? Tell me if you know all this.
Okay. So these are all rhetorical questions, and they're all true of God. These are things God can say yes to, and that Job can say, no, I haven't. No, didn't see that. No, didn't do that. No. But God has done all these things. He's seen the depths of the earth and the depths of the seas. He knows the mid-Atlantic ridge, that mountain range under the Atlantic Ocean between the continents. God's been there, and he sustains it. Okay, and then let's go to 40, verses 1 through 5. And Anna, verse 1.
The Lord said to Job,
oh boy, you got off easy. Go ahead, Allison.
Will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him.
Then Job answered the Lord,
I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth.
I've spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more.
Okay. So Job says, okay, of course. Of course. So let's try to summarize the book. Job, What's it about, or what's the content of the book of Job? Let's go with that first. What's the content of the book of Job? What's a good summary for it? Somebody take a stab.
Sometimes the righteous suffer and they don't know why.
Sometimes the righteous suffer and they don't know why. That's a great summary of the book. Someone says to you, what's Job about? It's about sometimes the righteous suffer and they don't know why. Who's in charge of the suffering? God is. We learn that. We learn here that God and Satan are not equal gods. That's what's often thought. When evil happened, that's when, and you get that a little bit in charismatic theology. Satan is very, very powerful in charismatic theology. He can bind you and do all kinds of things to you, and you're really unprotected by God. But Satan is a creation, and we see in this book, Satan can do only God's will of harm against people, and that God protects his people. And you see that in the bilayered, or the two-layered, tragedies upon Job that only happen to Job as God says, very well, go do this. And so we learn from this book, all suffering that we experience and that others experience is at the hand of God, yet God has the right to do it. He set the foundations of the earth, not us. And he can do with the earth and all his creation what he wants to do, and it's good. And he has good purposes for it. Okay, so good summary there. Couple of things here. The ending. So let's take a look at Job 42:7 through the end. Where are we in our reading? Okay, Bill.
After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends, because you have not spoken to me what is what is right, as my servant Job has.
Okay, so what's God say about Job?
He has spoken of God what is right.
He's spoken of God what is right. And what's God think of the counselors, the friends?
Not much.
Not much, yeah. He's rebuking them. Okay, go ahead.
You have not spoken to me what is right, as my word, as my servant Job has. So Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad and Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite did what the Lord told them, and the Lord accepted Job's prayer.
After Job had prayed for his friends, the Lord restored his fortunes and gave him twice as much as he had had before.
All his brothers and sisters and everyone who had known him before came and ate with him in his house. They comforted and consoled him over all the trouble that the Lord had brought upon him, and each one gave him a piece of silver and a gold ring.
The Lord blessed the latter part of Job's life more than the former part. He had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000 yoke of oxen, and 1,000 donkeys. And he also had 7 sons and 3 daughters.
The first daughter he named Jemima, the second Keziah, the third Harim-Haphat.
Nowhere in all the land were without a man as beautiful as Job was, and their father granted them no inheritance along with their brothers.
After this, Job lived 140 years. He saw his children and their children to the 4th generation. And so he died old and full of years.
Okay, there we go. So that's the end of the book. Job endures the trial. He's faithful to the Lord. And even on earth, the Lord rewards him. And this ends up happening. It's just a matter of timing for him. Even though that, is not guaranteed. We could, chop off the end of the book and that'd be good enough. But the Lord yet rewards him, and so sometimes that happens to us in life too, that sometimes there's a sweetness and prosperity to us in whatever way that prosperity is. In the end, we just, have to endure. We don't know what's over the next hill. And so we keep going. Okay. So our questions here, what's Job's evaluation of Job's friends?
Thumbs down.
Thumbs down, yep. What's God's evaluation of Job in contrast?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up, yep. What is Job's end that God brings about? Yeah, blessing and honor, and everyone had abandoned Job. Now all the friends and relatives come to him and eat with him and, honor him and celebrate with him. So that's good. Here's some themes of the book. We won't go through all this stuff, but theme, life is full of trouble. Okay, that's a big theme in the book. Here are verses that speak to this, all these verses here. Let's say basically life is full of trouble. Depression is witnessed, and so there are a ton of verses here where you see, if you want to understand someone who's depressed, read these verses. Depression is, where there's a lack of hope. Sometimes even when there is hope, but there's no hope for things to get better. And so you see a ton of verses with that in it. Third theme, how to counsel the brokenhearted and the depressed. And so there's some good verses for that. In short, sit with them. And don't assume you have a solution. And don't give them a solution. The solution of the friends is, well, be righteous and things will get better for you. And Job has been righteous, right? And he basically calls their counsel torture in several spots there. But you sit with the depressed person. You don't offer advice, and you don't say, don't worry, things will get better. Don't say that. That gets said by the counselors here, and it comes off as mocking to the depressed person. Okay? And so just sit with them and say, I'm sorry. I wish things were better. I'm sorry. I don't know why this is going on, and I wish it weren't. Show sympathy to this. Yeah, if you want to get these verses, I never intended for us to get through them, but I did want to put them up there. You can take a picture of this slide if you want to.
It doesn't really come up in the camera. Is that available later for download?
I can. Yeah, someone write that on your welcome slip, and I'll send those out to the congregation. How to take the friends. What they say is generally true. It's proverbially true. So a lot of times when you're reading this, you're like, yeah. It's just misapplied to Job. And so it becomes cruelty to Job. But what they say is generally true. Bob, can you read this bullet?
There are great and true statements about God and great passages of praise in their speeches.
Yeah. We won't read that, but we kind of got a sense of that in God's response to Job. But they say wonderful things about God. So does Job. These things are true. And then number 2, Jim, can you read this?
But what they say is almost always misapplied to Job and his circumstances.
Okay. So lots of things that are said that are true and great passages of praise. Things that are true of God and what he's done and how he is. It's just they're assuming that we will always experience the results of this in our lives. And sometimes we're just waiting. And sometimes there'll be lots of things for us that don't come true for us until final judgment and the new heavens and new earth. Yeah, Chase.
Did Elihu speak accurately? Because God did the same thing about him.
Yeah, I'd have to look, and in my morning reading, I'm not to Elihu yet, and so I'm not apprised of that. But I'll let you know. I'll probably send you an email this week when I get to it. I'll get to it soon. Okay. All right. Well, let's pray.